number of personnel changes, resulting in a couple of fairly disjointed sounding albums before Tommy Bolin joined the band as guitarist, and really it's since then that they seem to have re-established their direction. Gang Bang is their best album for some while, and at the time we were in New York in February this year, the LP had just been released. So while we were there, we spoke with Tommy Bolin and the one remaining member from the original band, the drummer, Jim Fox.
Okay, Jim, if we could pick up the history of the band at the point where Joe Walsh left. What actually led up to his leaving?
Well, Joe was feeling pretty much like he wanted to do his own music. Very, very much, you know, his own trip where he had a group and he was totally calling the shots and everything. He was missing that in the James Gang because we're a group.
Right.
And he wanted to be totally in command, and he felt like he just needed to change to get off into his own kind of stuff. At the time he left, he was thinking more or less acoustically. You know, he wanted to get into an acoustical trip, and we said, well, you know, fine, great. It was a very amicable parting and everything, you know, and he did it just incredibly. We rapped about it for months and months and months, and finally decided, well, come the end of the year, I'm just going to have to make the move. So at that point, we picked up two other guys, Don Triano to play guitar and Roy Kenner to sing. And it went on pretty much that way until about 6 months ago, when we collectively again decided that Donnie just wasn't the rock and roller that the band needed. And about 2 hours after we decided that, the telephone rings, and it's Walsh, and he says, hey, you need a guitar player? Got this phone number for you.
Got great
you know?
timing.
He says, his name's Tommy Bolin, and he's really weird. You better call him quick, you know. So I gave him a call, and we talked for a while, and he says, sure, you know, I'd like to try it. So coming on Joe's recommendation, we figured, well, he's got to be fairly capable.
Right. What were you doing at that point, Tom?
I was playing with Joe's, well, some of my people in a band called Energy left and joined Joe's band. So I think he felt guilty that he took my band away from me.
So I figured you got to get the kid a job now.
Right, yeah. So they gave me, a buzz, and flew to Omaha.
Right.
And things came together really well. Like we were together like 2 weeks or so before we did Bang, and it came off really smooth. You know?
Only 2 weeks.
That's all.
How much time did you spend in the studio on the Gang Bang album?
A week.
5 days. There was some really good foundation there. You know, we talked for 2 days. We realized that the influences were almost totally parallel, and any kind of music that we talked about, Tommy seemed to know, and anything he talked about, we seemed to know. So there were no barriers at all. It was just a matter of playing. We just sat down and played.
Because Energy were playing backup to a lot of blues people at that point, weren't they?
Yeah, we were doing like behind Albert King and Jeremy Steig for a while, who is a flute player here in New York, and John Lee Hooker. And
yeah, I'm surprised it was only 2 weeks preparing for the Gang Bang album, because I mean, how much difference does it make to a band when there is a change of personnel?
It depends on exactly who's leaving and who's coming in. When Joe left, it took a long time to get the feeling back that we wanted. And in fact, I'm not sure we ever achieved it until we got Tommy. But when we got Tommy, the change from Don to Tommy was so much more on the wavelength of the band that it was just amazing.
it's more like we're all moving in one direction now.
Exactly. Donnie is a tremendously capable guitar player. He just blows my mind. He's amazing at his chops. But his direction is not at all towards rock and roll. And it just, he resents having to be on a stage. He would rather be at home, sitting on his amp, playing on about one, And that's his thing, and it's great. Like I say, he's a phenomenal guitarist, but he's not a rock and roll player at all. He's not an entertainer. And no matter how much he told himself he wanted to be, he just didn't want to be.
Right.
So the change was really necessary.
Because you were working with Billy Cobham, weren't you, Tommy?
I met him a couple years ago when I was playing with Jeremy Steig. We did some demos for Columbia, and they thought it was a little too bizarre to release at the time. So he called me about, we did Spectrum last July, I think. And he has a new one. I just saw him yesterday. He has a new one. The new album is a whole new concept, which I really admire about him, because, Spectrum was fairly successful, you know, in pop and in jazz charts especially. And to take that a step, you know, a secure step where that was, and take it. Now he's got a lot of horns in the group, 3 horns, and it's really new, you know. Again.
So you're going to continue playing outside the band, Tom?
Well, I think what we'll do is, concerning like the Billy's thing, is in the next within the next year or so, if we have time off and if he has time off, then we're probably going to do some touring together. Yeah, I hope so.
What are the James Gang's plans for the future?
And we'd like to get some time out, hopefully at the end of next month, and do some recording. And the touring just never seems to stop.
Have you actually started working in the studio on the new album?
No, not yet. Not yet. It's still in the rehearsal stages and putting tunes together and stuff like that.
What about Britain? Are you wanting to do Europe?
Oh, very much.
Oh, yeah.
Very much. Some of the best tours we ever had in Europe. And it's really enjoyable. It's so much different than the States, and the audiences are 100 times better in Europe, in Britain especially.
Do you think that?
Oh, absolutely.
What, in terms of response?
In terms of response and respect.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we were just discussing that with, I think, somebody from the Straubs when we played on a show the other night with us. And it's amazing. It seems like American audiences are just dying to boo the opening act off the stage. You know, it's that kind of attitude, you know, wait for the headliner and the heck with everybody else and don't pay attention, you know, and walk in and on everything. But our experiences in Europe were totally different. You know, people come to hear the music that's on the show. And that's not always true in the States.
Do you find it hard actually finding places to play in Britain?
Yeah, it's a little tough, I'm told. I mean, you know, we've always had our gigs all set up, and we don't really know what went into setting the tour up. But I know there aren't a lot of large places to play. And we did some dates with The Who a few years ago around England. And, you know, they played places that we would never even consider playing in the States just because of their size. But in England, it's necessary.
Well, Jim, Tommy, I really do hope you make it to England soon. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
The James Gang in New York.